Welcome to the ADF Insider Basic Series. This series demonstrates the basic skills you will require for working with the JDeveloper IDE and building ADF applications. Today's presentation is a fighter pilot's guide to the JDeveloper IDE Editor. For developers using the JDeveloper IDE for the first time, it can seem rather overwhelming. However, there are only 6 core windows of the IDE that you will typically use, of which the editor shown in the central document window is where developers will do most of their work. The JDeveloper Editor works like a head-up display in a fighter jet, commonly known as a HUD. The HUD is designed to augment a fighter pilot's view of the world by providing additional visual indications about altitude, speed, targets, and more. In today's presentation, you'll learn how to use the editor in the JDeveloper IDE to read and identify your code faster, use the editor to increase your productivity, learn how to use the editor to help other programmers read your code, and learn how to navigate your code faster. Let's first investigate how to use the editor to read and identify your code much faster than a simple text editor. So in front of us we have the basic JDeveloper IDE with a Java file displayed in the Application Navigator. To open that file, we simply double click on it, and then we get the main editor opening showing us the source code essentially. Now, one of the very first tricks you might want to do with the editor is, rather than having this limited view onto your code, you can actually double click on the tab, and now you get a maximized view of that particular file. Once you finish, you can just simply double click again to minimize it and continue on your way using the rest of the windows. So we'll, for this particular presentation, work with it maximized. One of the first things you'll notice when looking at the actual source code is that indeed the JDeveloper IDE editor has syntax color highlighting occurring. We can see that comments are in blue, keywords are in dark blue, our own code is in black, and if we were to type in additional code such as literals, though it may be a little hard to see in this Camtasia recording, the actual literals are in green. All of this sort of things, these syntax color highlighting, are all controlled by Tools, Preferences, Code Editor, Syntax Colors, and here you can see all the different syntax colors that occur. And you're free to change these as you want, or maybe change them to another IDE coloring scheme that you're used to. Overall, this is maybe particularly useful for people that are colorblind, that can't see reds, greens and blues. You can change the colors to suit your own needs. The very next thing you might notice in the code editor is that the current line where the cursor is blinking is highlighted in yellow. So as I select different lines in the editor, you'll see that this current line indicator moves. This very quickly helps you work out where you're working in a large amount of code. In turn, another feature that's useful for identifying the block of code you're working in is this margin area where you can see this little left blue bar. Watch what happens as I move around the code. I'm going to move from this function to this function. Now you can see the blue bar there. And if I move to the class, you can see that the whole class is currently highlighted. This quickly helps us work out what our current block is. Another useful feature for working out what the current block is that the current block's braces are highlighted for us in light grey. So again, watch what happens when I move to this function. We can now see its braces highlighted, and watch what happens when I move to the class. You can see its brackets are effectively highlighted for us as well. Another feature to help us to work with and understand the blocks of code in our overall code structures is the block coloring feature, which is turned on by this button at the top. When we turn it on, we can see automatically that the comments are highlighted or have a background color of blue, and if I add additional code, such as this for loop, you can see that its internal block structure is highlighted in pink, and these coloring schemes essentially will highlight each block of code in our overall code. These block coloring features and the colors are changed by Tools, Preferences, Code Editor, and then block coloring. And you can essentially change all these different blocks and their coloring schemes to suit your own needs. A feature that's designed to help us work with code when we've got lots of code on the screen is this shows selected element only feature. And this feature allows us to select a block of code, then this button up here on the top right of the toolbar, and essentially now once we've selected it we can see just the function that we're interested in and want to work with. Then we can go ahead and code. Once we're happy with that we can essentially click the button again and we now see the complete class. Other features that help you effectively hide code and show code only when you want to see it are the expand and collapse facilities that are available here in the left margin, which allow you to expand and collapse lots of different blocks within your code, such as comments, the actual functions, and even the overall class. If at any stage you want to get that code back, you can just simply expand it again, but you might notice then when I even just drag my mouse over the collapsed code, I'll get a little pop-up telling me what that code contained within is. So if I expand this overall function, this overall class, and float over this function, I can actually see the code within this function. Once I've finished collapsing and expanding code and I want to just see the whole thing again, if I right click in the margin, you can see I've got collapse and expand options, and I can just pick the expand or option to get back to where I originally was. Another feature designed to help us work out where we are in the overall structure of the current class and functions is the breadcrumb trail down here. Watch what happens with this breadcrumb trail as I select different functions. You can see now it says getName. I'm in the getName function within the departments class, and here it says I'm within the setName function of the departments class. Okay, and this breadcrumb trail is fully selectable, so I can click the department node in the breadcrumb trail and you can see it's now selected the department class within the overall source code, and within that I can select the getName, okay, the getName function, and it now takes me to the getName function, and again you can see the breadcrumb trail is effectively reflecting that fact for me. Now you may not have already noticed another additional feature of the editor that I already have turned on by default. Now this won't be on yours by default, but we have line numbers turned on. And by default, right click, toggle line numbers, this is what you'll see. But when I'm demonstrating or I'm teaching, I always had the line numbers turned on, so I can quickly say to one of my students or somebody who's watching a presentation, please look at line 12. Okay, so it gives a great reference to what current lines are on the screen and to refer to one of those current lines to avoid confusion when you're talking to other people. A very subtle feature in the IDE is called the quick diff or the quick difference feature. Now to watch this feature, have a look what's going to happen between these two left margins. Do you see there's a little white bar occurring in here? Now as I add additional code, did you notice a little green bar appears in the left hand side? And in fact when I float my mouse over it you actually get a little diff showing you the amount of code that I've either added or removed from the previous save. Okay, so this is a very small diff tool, and in a way it's designed to augment the true history facility that occurs here, where we can actually compare different versions of my code behind the scenes visually. So this little quick diff is really just to show you the current differences since the last save. If I want to undo those differences, I can just right click on that little diff and do revert differences, and now you can see the code reverts back to the original state. A feature in the IDE that's very useful for tracking all the instances of, say, a variable is the highlight feature. For example, what I can do here in the class is highlight this name instance variable, then click the highlight button, and now you can see in the overall code all the occurrences of the word name. You might have also noticed in this right hand side margin we've got the relative position of all those highlights in the overall source code, and as we select them you can see that it automatically selects them in the code for me. Once I'm happy with the highlighted code I can just turn it off again, or alternatively if I want to do always automatic highlighting I can go to the search menu and turn on the auto code highlight feature, so now we don't need to toggle the feature on and off. One critical piece of information that the IDE gives you in the editor is that of syntax errors and warnings. If you look at this overall code here, if I put a space in my variable name, straight away you'll see that the editor indicates to this indicates this to me as a syntax error. See the red squiggly line. So syntax errors come with red squiggly lines underneath, and warnings come with orange squiggly lines. If we float our mouse over the particular error, it tells us, hey, this isn't a valid expression for Java. And in addition, you might notice in the right-hand side margin again, we can now see that the overall code is flagged as in error in red, and in the margin relative to the actual error location in the file, if we float our mouse over that little red box, it gives us pretty much the same error message, and we can click on that and it will take us straight to the problem. Now that we've looked at some of the visual indications that are coming through from the editor in the JDeveloper IDE, let's look at some of the productivity features to make you a faster programmer. In this example here, we can see a department class with a name attribute and typical set and get name accessors. Now imagine you've just written this class for the first time and you've just created the associated attribute. Now, without a doubt, it's very painful having to type in all the code for the accessors, and JDeveloper will actually save you having to do this by right-clicking the variable and doing the Generate Accessors option, or alternatively, you can do the same thing on the toolbar, and it will pop up this little dialog, and for the current class, and in this case the specifically selected attribute, it will say, hey, what accessors do you want to create? We tick the tick boxes in this case, OK, and suddenly we see we've now got all the methods generated for us. Alternatively, if you want to add the Java docs, if we click the top or the API of the actual function, you can see the little code assist feature says, hey, I'll add the missing Java docs for you. Okay, so now we've got our missing Java docs, and we pretty much have a piece of code that we can go ahead and work with from here. Further to generating the accessors, there are features available to generate other pieces of code for you. For example, here, if I wanted to type or surround this with a try, catch, finally block, it would take me a little time to type that. But what I can do is highlight that piece of code, right-click and do surround with, or alternatively go to the toolbar and do the same thing. And this little dialog here gives you some options about what you can surround this code with, and I'm going to surround it with a try, catch, finally. Okay, so that's just saved me having to type in all those structures. It's all in there rather quickly. Another very extremely useful feature is that of the code template feature. Say in this finally block down here, for whatever reason, I want to type a for loop. Now, typing a for loop can be quite tedious. Oops, typos, what a problem. What you can do with the code template feature is effectively bypass this by essentially typing in some keywords and then either via the source expand template option or hitting the hotkey Control Enter, you see that it actually fills out a piece of code for you. And you might notice within the code template that's been injected, we can see that it's highlighting the value I, and you can see these other grey locations. Now if I change I to J, notice that I within the for loop has changed in all locations, and now I can tab to the other locations and change some of the other variables as well. These code templates are all driven by the Tools, Preferences, Code Editor, Code Template section. And inside of here you can see all the different keys, such as the 4i one that I just used. You can now see the tab positions, plus the variables that essentially occur in the code, and any imported classes that are required, and nothing's required for a standard for loop. So you're free to make use of these code templates to save you having to do lots of typing, and you are free to also create your own code templates. This is a massive productivity booster, saving you typing and effectively typing wrong things like I did previously. Generally speaking, the IDE has quite a few features in it to save you typing. One very useful feature that you will use all the time is that of the completion insight. Say we want to call one of the print line functions of system.out. Now, unfortunately, you can't remember what all the print line functions are. In fact, you can't remember what all the system.out functions are at all. What you'll see here is the completion insight automatically opens itself and it shows you all the functions that are available from that particular class. Now, we notice that we've got the print and print line functions available here, but if you notice, if I go back to the original code and I start typing in, it actually narrows down to select the functions that I'm interested in. And saying that I pick one of these particular classes like print line long, will actually complete the actual function for me. We then see the parameter insight. It gives me an idea of all the different versions of this function that are available and the different parameter combinations that this function can take. So in this case, I'm going to pass in an integer. Along the lines of the same insight type facilities, another common problem when you're typing in and using the current completion insight facility available in the editor is you might, for instance, pick, let's pick current time millis. Now, we've inserted the code and then suddenly we're looking at the code and going, oh, that's right, current time millis returns some sort of data type. Now, was it a long or was it an int? I can't remember. And so you might end up writing some accidental code like this. That's wrong. So in order to save you having to try and remember the data types, what you can in fact is do this. If you go system dot and it brings up the current code completion code inside editor, you can actually press, and you can see the keys up here, you can press Control space. It will bring up in blue the original options, but if you press Control space again, now notice it's in a magenta color, and when you pick current time millis, notice that not only does it enter the right hand side of the expression, but it does the left hand side with the data type for you. So now you don't have to go back and sort of backfill the two sides of the expression to get the result that you're interested in. One of the problems when you're editing code is sometimes you'll jump backwards and forwards in the code, and for instance you may not have yet put a semicolon on the end of the line. So your current cursor might be here and you're going, oh, I've got to go and reach for my mouse to move the cursor all the way over there, I've got to press the arrow key several times. This is all a little bit painful. So again, the editor provides a very quick feature for solving that problem. If you go to Source, Complete Statement, or you press Control Shift Enter, you'll notice that now it's put a semicolon at the end of the line and moved the cursor to that location too, effectively saving us some typing. Now at this point we're starting to add many lines of code to our actual application. And as we add additional lines of code, it's very easy to mess up the formatting of the code. As you can see here, I haven't taken great care in laying the code out. Now for myself, not a big problem at the moment because I'm really in the zone of coding. But what happens if I come back and look at this code in a few days, or alternatively, I check this code into Subversion and give it to another developer? This code is rather messy and it doesn't really fit nice corporate standards. So inbuilt into the JDeveloper IDE is a formatting facility. If you right-click on the code and go Reformat, it will actually format it to a whole bunch of rules built into the JDeveloper IDE. Now this makes your code a lot more tidy for yourself and other people to read, but also gets rid of all those silly conversations about coding standards. Basically, you just take the ones that JDeveloper provides to you. You don't get bogged down in all these superfluous details. Eventually, however, that wingman comes along and looks at your code and goes, that for loop, not very necessary. Now, I'm not sure if I should remove it or not, so, well, what about I comment it out? Now, what you could do is come in here and type in the comments on each line. Oh, you see, it's a bit of a pain. I'm having trouble getting my cursor in the right location. All a little bit problematic in trying to make the code tidy very quickly by commenting out a section. So alternatively, what you can do is select the block of code that you're interested in, go to Source and toggle line comments or Control / and you'll see that that code is quickly commented out. Or if we toggle it again, commented back in, or sorry, I should say uncommented. So very quickly now we can actually remove large chunks of our code and put them back in without the tedious thing of typing on every line, the line comments. If we actually have a look at the right-click context menu when we select some text, you might notice under the source option we have quite a considerable amount of options for editing the code, and mostly this is reflected in the source menu up here. Inside of that source menu you will also stuff because if you go to Tools, Preferences, Code Editor, and Save Actions, what you can do now is when the file is saved, you can tell it to automatically apply, for instance, the trim trailing whitespace option. So this way you don't have to keep on doing that to the file just to ensure that it has no hidden white spaces in the file. Finally, let's talk about the facilities that the IDE provides for quickly navigating around your code. Now, one of the most obvious facilities is this find facility for searching things within the current function, within the current class, and you can see it here, finding the keyword's name in my code. Alternatively, you can use the search find facility, which pops up a dialog, and you can even use that with search, find, and replace. So to find a word and replace it. There are all options here for matching case, going backwards and forwards, pretty typical text editor type facilities. Of a more useful nature is the Find in Files options to search all the code on your current file system for the instance of the piece of text. This proves very valuable when you're working with large sets of applications, source code. Other features that are available in terms of the navigation is the Quick Outline facility, which gives you a little pop-up that shows you all the functions that are available in your current class, and you can double click on them to quickly navigate to them. This is very much similar to what the structure window provides in the overall IDE. If you have a very large code set, so let's say we have this particular class here, and I'll just create another class, doesn't particularly matter what its name is. But if you have lots of code and you're sort of flipping between all those pieces of code, it can sometimes get very difficult to keep on going back to the right location in that code. So what you can do in the right hand margin is toggle bookmarks in the different files. Okay, so you see the little bookmark icon that appears in the margin. And now we go to the Navigate menu, go to Next Bookmark, go to Next Bookmark, and you can see that it's navigating around the different bookmarks, quickly allowing us to get around our code. In context of the Navigate menu, you can see additional options for going to a particular line number, going to your last edit, finding a particular Java type, going to the Java doc, going to a file, and so on. Pretty obvious features and pretty common to most text editors. Possibly one other feature that's a little unusual in an editor is the IDE also has the concept of browser back buttons. So here we can go back, navigate back, and you notice it's going back in terms of and forwards in terms of the files that we have in our application. So in summary, we can see that the editor in JDeveloper has facilities for helping you read very complex pieces of code by highlighting blocks and showing you where you're currently editing, and also helping you to identify that code in a faster fashion rather than being overwhelmed by all the code on the screen. You see the editor has a lot of built-in functionality to boost your productivity, saving you typing out repetitive code. It's got code template features, generate accessor features, all things that you should make use of every day to stop you dealing with the basics of code and setting it all out and really get down to the real job of coding, and that's actually putting real algorithms in there. The editor also takes great care to give you facilities to tidy your code up and make it more presentable to your other coders out there, what I like to call the wingmen. And finally, there are plenty of facilities available for allowing you to navigate around your code faster rather than actually going to the application navigator, opening a file, searching for the code line you're interested in, then opening another file, searching for the code line. You can set up things like bookmarks, you can use the find and search facilities, you can use all of these to very quickly locate code within your overall systems. If you're interested in learning more about JDeveloper, the IDE and the application development framework, head to oracle.com/technology/JDev. There you'll find plenty of downloadable tutorials, discussion forums, sample applications and the core developer guides. Thanks for your time today, and I hope you can join me for another ADF Insider Basics demonstration soon.